The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan, your host. This is a getaway edition of the Joyful Friar. My three Dominican brothers and I are on a little staycation kind of. We drove a couple of hours up into the northern outskirts of Phoenix, where someone that loves us has given us a few days off. The guys who work in campus ministry are at the end of an academic term. They're tired. The center is closed, and it happens that we're only a week out from Christmas, so they're kind of catching their breath between one period of activity and the next. And I'm along for the ride. So I don't have my religious habit with me, but I do have my Dominican cross, which I wear when I'm not wearing the habit much of the time. Today, we're going to be introducing a new story, at least a new one, to the podcast. It's from book 2, and of the 3 Afterlife Interrupted books, it's the middle child, which I am. I'm the third of 5. This book is less known than the other 2. The third one I sell a lot of because it's most recent. The first one I saw plenty of because it's an introduction to the topic, and so it's the one I recommend to people who are learning about the work that my prayer partners and I do for the first time. And then in between is book 2. I haven't told as many stories from it on the podcast, so today I'm choosing one that takes us back to the really the first week of the pandemic. We're back to third week of March of 2020. You might want to think about what was it like when you first heard about this contagion that was beginning to really take hold. It was beginning to reshape transportation, gatherings of all kinds. It was canceling out lots of events, and we were all not sure what was coming next. It was especially for people who contracted uh, the COVID illness. It was for many. It was the event that caused the end of their life. It just had a lot of fear surrounding the whole thing. I'm trying to recall it. Um, but, life does go on, even for people who die, regardless of whatever they died from. And in this case, neither Virgil or his cousin Arturo died of it, but they were both affected by it here and hereafter. So this story is chapter 8 of Afterlife Interrupted, book 2. We call it Virgil and Cousin Arturo. They were both Hispanic. Each of them spoke Spanish as his first language, although both also spoke English. Of course, I live in Tucson, only about an hour from the international border with Mexico. I'll be down in a couple of the towns down towards the border in the coming weeks to give some relief to a priest down there and take over for a little while. Anyway, this story came during the night of February 23rd, 2020. So that was about 3 weeks or a month before we learned about the pandemic. But it took us about that long, about a month, to get an appointment with prayer partners and do the session that we do to help them cross. Those sessions used to be done a lot more in person, although I was already doing some of them via Zoom, which I'm using to do this podcast. But during the couple of years of the pandemic, we began to do almost all of our crossing sessions on Zoom, and it works just fine. But here's the dream as I received it and wrote it down on the night of February 23rd, 2020. I was a man walking alone in a town at night, It was very dark. I was trying to remember a song lyric that had a season of occupational names in it. I don't know why. I became afraid that I was being followed, so I walked faster and faster. I began to shout, "Help, thief!" and I awoke. Well, it turned out um, that Virgilio, or Virgil, as he said, the English way was the way that he referred to himself most of the time, was just alone at night, walking in a dark place, and he became aware that there was a man following him that looked like trouble. The guy was actually probably high on drugs already, is what Virgil said, but then was a crime of opportunity. He probably, Virgil said, was probably looking for money to buy more drugs and wanted to rob him. He said he chose a really poor target because I didn't have much money. I wasn't really worth very much to him. But the consequence of it was he was knocked to the ground and was hit with some object that was at hand and killed. So he died traumatically and quickly. He didn't linger, he said. He died quickly from his injuries, but he was, he died a crime victim. So what happens next? Well, for everyone, when we leave our bodies, however we leave them, there is a next. There's always the help of our guardian angel in Catholic parlance, who is there to help us in one of these, really defining moments of our life. I was working with Michael and Linda, my two of my prayer partners. Linda passed away a year ago now, but anyway, they were helping me with this one, and we went into our protected prayer. We always pray with Michael the Archangel, with Holy Mary, the Mother of Jesus. I like to call on Saints Dominic and Francis and Saint Rose of Lima and Maximilian Kolbe. I have a number of different saint friends and angel friends who we ask to be with us to keep us safe from any interference and anyone who might try to do us any kind of harm. So that's how this started. Um, Michael welcomed the guardian of and that guardian didn't stay long enough to even to give us his name. We just referred to him as the guardian. And he said that he was helping a little bit. It happened that that day we had an early appointment and I had overslept and I was just mostly awake, but still not at the top of my game when this session began. And the guardian said he could be something like a kind of an animal that expands itself. And he was inside me at my invitation, expanding me to make me more alert. And he said he'll be just fine, that he's ready to do this. I'm just giving him a little boost. So I love that when the guardians are, you know, they do what they need to do. Anyway, I like the way that he spoke here because the one that he guarded died frightened. He was attacked, and he said uh, he was beset by an assailant and he died in a fright. Once he was aware of what had happened to him, he could receive it as a truth without drama and emotion. That's a favorite idea of mine because oftentimes drama gets in the way of clear thinking, and that's what this guardian said. He said, naturally, not only for humans, but even us angels, our thoughts and our emotions are a unity. But sometimes it's helpful to parse them, to separate them a bit, to be able to understand truth more clearly. Sometimes heightened emotion can overwhelm the intellect, and we no longer think clearly. We begin to lose some freedom when we lose track of the truth. This one had every reason to do that. We only needed to help him get back that out a bit. That's a phrase that makes sense to you, he said, doesn't it? So he was just he was describing that after Virgil left the body, um, they had to help him kind of calm down and separate out uh, unhelpful emotion just to be able to think clearly. I do that all the time. He said, the guardian said, he is, we brought him to you because he's ready to do this crossing. You'll find him very cooperative. And we did. And then he came through and um, he knew that Michael and Linda both do hospice volunteer work. And he said, I didn't really know anything about that. And I didn't die of an illness that involved, a deathbed. He was killed on a street quickly. He said, I did at least escape the pain that comes with slower dying, but mine was almost all at once. So he described that he didn't want to break into a run to show that it was obvious that he was afraid of this guy. He thought that maybe if he was just kind of cool about it, the everything would be all right. But in fact, of course, he did end up being beaten and killed. Uh, he said they brought me to a place where I could regain my strength. He said you heard them say that part of it was sorting out fear and anger, and he said I've never used this word. He did this several times. Perplexity. Remember, English was not his first language anyway, and that's not a common English word, one not often used. He said it's about being perplexed is trying to make sense of something too big. Um, he um, he said, I know that I need to make a movement that involve conflicting emotions. Um, he he said I had to move through more sadness and fear than anger. He wasn't angry at the man who did this to him. He said, because I knew so many people who were addicted to drugs of one kind or another that I felt compassion for them. So I wasn't going to be all angry about that. It's just that I died with fear and sadness. Um, so he said the work that I needed to do afterwards wasn't really about uh, overcoming anger, shock, or sadness. And he said he had a sense of futility, that his life in the end amounted to nothing. And that really bugged him. So he said, if everything that one is and does can end so senselessly in the street, why bother? What's the point of anything if it can come to this kind of an end? And that could be important for some of you who are listening to this or seeing it. Um, his guardian uh, called him on it, and his guardian asked him this really important question. Decide if you want to live with the consequences of these emotions and thoughts. Do you really want to be a person who thinks there's no reason for you to be or to do? The sadness that you feel when you think this way will be your constant companion if that's what you choose. Here's the concise formulation of that question. Would you like to be eternally sad? I do some counseling for folks that seek me out. I try to do only one appointment. The way that I'm living my life right now is not as someone who's sequentially counseling the same person over time. But I think of myself as like a tow truck driver. Um, I might be able to pull you out of the ditch. That's much better. I got rid of this. For those of you that are not watching this, but only listening to it, I'm sitting next to some shades that were casting a bunch of weird shadows across me, so I just closed them. Um, we don't have to be led around by our thoughts and emotions. I'll get into that in a more next time, but that was the question that was put to him by his guardian. Do you want to be eternally sad? Well, Virgil said, well, of course, when it was put to me that way, I said, no, I would not like to be eternally sad. And here's what he said next. I would like to be useful. Well, that's a great idea because you can be useful on a good day or a bad day or an in-between one. That's just a matter of looking around you for something that needs doing and doing it, someone who needs helping and helping them. That doesn't have to have a whole big emotional overlay around it. And you don't have to be a picture of mental health. You can just help somebody. It's as simple as that. And he said, sadness can isolate and make one too focused on oneself at the expense of focusing on others. Well, you're absolutely right, Virgil. Um, anyway, he said, when I said that, there was like a chorus of applause around me. It's like they were saying, you've climbed to this plateau, you're making progress, and we can see it. You know that this kind of thought about sadness and pointlessness of existence really needs to be transcended, or you'll just stay sad eternally. Not because you're punished, just because actions have consequences. And the consequence of that kind of thinking is sadness that won't go away. It won't stop until you stop it. Um, uh, he said, there is not a small number of you who die at the hand of another. Now you're further down the path of wholeness than some of the others. If you choose, you could circle back and turn around and help the one behind you. You know, I often reference AA and the healing 12-step movements that have gotten so many people toward freedom from addiction. And very often it's people who have achieved some sobriety. They might not be a picture of sobriety themselves, or that they very often will say, I'm a recovering alcoholic, not a recovered one. You can help the one behind you. Um, People are moving along a pathway. We could be teammates, he said. So he said, I was given glimpses of that even with the ones who helped me and how much they enjoy their sense of purpose, their camaraderie, the angels and the afterlife human helpers that assist, and including us. There's a whole team of people that help these traumatized souls. He said, I see the camaraderie. There's grace and goodness that come from being a part of a team that does good work. I had moments of that in my life. Although I was still young, and because I was still young, I hadn't really chosen a particular life's purpose, a vocation. Um, and then he was told in the afterlife, you didn't live long enough on earth to get that all figured out, but there's no reason you can't do it now. If you'd like, that's part of what you can do as you make this passage is to figure out, a sense of what you'd really like to apply yourself to. What would you like to make your vocation, at least for this next part of your eternal life? Um, well, then it was time to call on somebody to help him move. That was we didn't need to delay it, and he decided after a short pause that he wanted it to be Arturo. He chose his cousin Arturo. He explained that Arturo was a few years older than he was, but they shared in common that they were both born into poverty. Uh, but the thing about Arturo was that he didn't let that circumstance define his entire life. He got busy figuring out how he could serve and how he could acquire a useful skill. He found a community college and some sort of trade school that had medical careers, and he applied himself to a program that he could afford. It wasn't, 4-year college with the student loan debt. He was he learned how to operate some complex medical equipment. He didn't say what, but some sort of medical devices. He wore scrubs. So he moved from poverty into a professional role. He worked alongside other healing professionals and was good at what he did. Uh, Unfortunately, he also died young. He was killed suddenly in an automobile accident. But Virgil remembered being at Arturo's funeral, and Virgil was used to family funerals being just that, family members, and hardly anybody else. This one was different because he had acquired so many professional relationships. So many people cared about him. They even called him a hero. Lots of people that didn't know our family were talking about my cousin like he was a hero, and they explained how good he was in the workplace and what a compassionate coworker he was, all of that. Um, so he was really impressed that his cousin had really made something for himself and had a purposeful, even though short, life. Well, when Arturo showed up, he showed up wearing scrubs, those kind of teal ones, the matching pants and shirt that were called scrubs. But the interesting thing was he showed himself to be against a backdrop of medical equipment. If you recall, there were some weeks and months maybe where, as the pandemic was obviously killing lots of people who were gasping for breath, there weren't enough ventilators to keep everybody ventilated who needed help breathing. People were dying because of that. Um, they were they were in short supply, and people were. I have across the way. I'm in a guest room where my bed is right here off screen, and I have to sleep with one of those apnea machines. And there's the common one is called a CPAP, and the one that I have is super duper. It's my because my apnea is more severe, so I have to have this machine that shoves lots of pressurized air up my nostrils to keep me breathing during the night without interruption. They were thinking of how to turn that machine into a ventilator. Well, Arturo showed up against like a wall of ventilators to show at a glance that the place where he is super abundant in resources. Nobody's going without. He explained that after our deaths, none of us get exhausted. Um, we just work hard because there's hard work to do and lots of it. Arturo explained that the Earth is sending us many more people than normal, and so we're all working harder to accommodate the ones that have just died of COVID. Then he explained in an interesting way. He said these people who die of this pathogen, this contagion, are dying in two ways. One of them is that they get feverish and they fall asleep, maybe go comatose and die unconscious. He said that's one way, but a lot of them can't catch their breath and they're struggling to breathe and they're frightened because they can't breathe and they die in that state. And he said some of them come to us in an agitated state, feeling even after they've left their bodies like they must continue to struggle to breathe. And they don't understand right away that they don't need to breathe anymore. So we give them what they think they need. We give them give them oxygen masks because that's what they think they need. And then as we work with them, we try to make it more and more obvious to them that this isn't really necessary, that you don't need this anymore. Look, you're able to be just fine without this, and then they can begin to absorb the circumstance that they're in, that they have died, and that they're still okay, that they're still themselves. Well, he said they need a chance to catch their afterlife breath. That's the way that Arturo put it. He said, we're not fooling them. We're just giving them what they think they need for as long as they think they need it. I like that. Well, anyway, that's all that it took. Arturo showed up and he came for his cousin and we were done. But we thought this one had uh, power, and especially because so many people were dying of the pandemic and this book came out during the pandemic, we wanted a pandemic story in it. We went back into protected prayer, this time with my sister Catherine, and asked for Virgil, and then wanted to ask him, may we please use your story in a book that because we think it would be helpful to people. Well, he explained to us that after he passed, he stayed with Arturo, and Arturo was busy. He was working with people that were crossing because of COVID. Uh, and Virgil said, I had no medical training, but some of the tasks weren't really medical. They were just practical. Somebody needed to do something, and I was told what to do. That happens all the time in emergency situations where any of us could be competent to do something, hold this or stand there or whatever, and whatever it was that was needed, you just do it. That's all. And so Virgil just said, I stayed at my post doing small tasks that needed to be done by someone who didn't have to have any particular skill. And that's what I did. So I became a kind of an adjunct afterlife healthcare worker for a time. He liked that. because he said, helping other people gives a sense of purpose, even if it's your long-term purpose, it's at least a short-term one, and it begins to build a self-esteem. And he needed that. He needed to know that his life wasn't just pointless because of the way that it ended, too short and violently. So he was built up by the idea that I really do want to be useful. I want to be helpful. Well, of course, that emergency situation didn't pertain indefinitely. Things slowed down, and there were opportunities for him to go on to do other things. But um, he said he really enjoyed the camaraderie of being on a team. He said the people here don't get exhausted or have stress issues. Um, he said, I don't have to keep doing it either. I didn't have a life in healthcare. And then when my cousin came, there was all this commotion going on. So I just thought, well, I'm already here. Why don't I just help here? And later there'll be time for something else. I'll go into that next time. But boy, isn't that important? Uh, I, I, I've had really important jobs with titles and responsibilities and budgets and staffs. There have been times in my life where I had very clear uh, vocation, where I had very clear responsibilities and important duties. But even when you're in the middle of that, you still go home and wash the dishes. You still mow the lawn or do the laundry or whatever. There's lots of times when even those of us who might have some big jobs to do have to do the little ones too and do things that are unnoticed because they just need to be done. Um, anyway, he said, as it's all turned out, I'm um, I'm yes, I died as a victim of a murder, but I'm okay, and life goes on. So that's it for this time. Next time, we'll go into what we call compassionate response, and we'll take it from there. But for now, I'm Father Nathan Castle, and I'm grateful that you spent time with me today on the story of Virgil and his cousin Arturo. Remember that I'm praying for you, and that if there's something that I might be able to do for you, if it pertains to this kind of work, please read at least one of the books before contacting me and asking to talk or correspond, because then we'll have a richer uh, a basis for our engagement. But anyway, know that I'm praying for you, and I'm grateful for your time and attention. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.